I want to pose a question specifically to Joseph Samuels. Thank you so much for your input and the broad picture. You mentioned the strengthening of the institutional forums, and I'm in higher education for the last 18 years as a staff member. And it's my sense that the moment our management structure shifts and comply with equity, and even do better on equity, that the institutional forums lose its purpose. And how does the higher education sector intend to give them back that purpose? The Act is very clear on the 5 requirements from the institutional forum. The second point I want to make is in terms, and the space where I'm currently operating is in student affairs, so student politics is very much the business of my job description. And it's my sense that there's also a loss of purpose. And you can see it in the voting percentages when SRCs are elected. It becomes intolerant not only of diversity, which includes race, gender, and disability and so on, but it plays the political agendas of the country out. And therefore we have students in council with less than 5% voting percentage, and we say that's inclusivity. And we do need some guidance from the higher education sector. I think there must be a difficult national debate about that, and say, can we continue to tolerate the only thing, and that's a political agenda? Because what we lose then is really the student's voice, because that was the intention of all the papers and then culminating in the Higher Education Act. And thirdly, I just want to say that I don't think gender is really on the agenda yet. I understand that race is dominant, but we didn't have a gender revolution in this country yet. And higher education is not there either. I always say that we can say that when we have a gender TRC. We didn't have one yet, where women can really come and tell publicly their stories about discrimination, oppression, and violence, and extreme forms of violence, of rape and murder. And it plays out in our campuses. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynette is just close by. Gosh, I am relinquishing my authority here up there. Oh, there is a mic. Dr. Magadi, and then Dr. Roberts, and then the gentleman here.
Is it on? Thank you so much to our 3 speakers. I just want to make one point. We're sitting around this table and we're talking about inclusivity. But I want to raise the point that for someone who's been in public higher education for the last 17 years and private higher education for the last year, in the private sector, we cannot speak about inclusivity. We have a top-of-the-art institution with top-of-the-art equipment where the method of education is completely different. We have 100% placement of students, but we charge 65,000 Rand a year. So when I started at the institution last year, June, we had 1 black student. We had 14 female students. So I really don't think the higher education system addresses the public sector at all. We cannot speak about race, and therefore, I cannot even, someone with a doctorate in gender studies, cannot even get to gender and disabilities. Because it is just for the Ministry of Education, the public sector doesn't matter. And those are actually the people that will be creating the jobs in this country. We don't really create people who will work in a force. We create entrepreneurs. And Mr. Samuels, I really think that is something that should be addressed.
Thank you. I'm sure you will address it now immediately. Dr. Roberts?
I wanted to say, Joe talked about access. I think we commonly and on a continuous basis define access very narrowly. Very few people talk about, what happens after access when the students get on campus. We find that, there's a migrant body of students who travel great distances on a daily basis, who do not have equal access to the facilities on campuses. The residences, they're not in residence, they're not near to the library and so forth. And so that's an aspect, that needs serious attention. I heard the debate about the 4-year degree, and I said, in terms of my experience now at the university, a 4-year, the students, majority of students take 4 years in any case. But I'm saying in terms of restructuring of that curriculum, if that curriculum doesn't restructure, in terms of the needs going forward that would also address the previous speaker, it will be meaningless. It will be meaningless to take the old curriculum and just spread it over 4 years. With curriculum restructure, we must really be serious about that and, address that. Then lastly, just, we battle with the students as they come into the university, because of the low pass rate that is there. Some schools aim for 33%, and some schools, fortunately, aim for higher. Then we have the language issue. One of the previous speakers said, he only had English during that English period. Unfortunately, it is still the same in many schools. And then, I think as Julian has just said, they come and then it's the books, the prescribed books that's from overseas, they now have to read for understanding, from those books. And Joe did mention that there needs to be, a recognition of that and the funding that must accompany that to say certain students definitely need more attention. There are those universities that take the A students, and they don't need that much because those students have been coached enough. But there are many, especially the historically disadvantaged universities, where that actually provide access for those students with the lower qualifications, lower pass rates, as the example that you set with the 70%. And we see that even if we take those students and we work with them, that when they come out, one of the speakers talked about that the students would be equal when they leave the university, and that's an important aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Roberts. The gentleman just next to you there.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. He has actually covered almost all my points. One was basically the shocking statistics about the issue of access versus the success. I think it will help if our government will basically shift the focus from increasing the number of students, or should I say previously disadvantaged students, who enter into the university, but also mainly focus on their success rate. Because we find that there is a larger influx of them entering into the university, but very few of them basically succeed in completing their qualification. And I think it goes back to the issue of, I want to believe that if you have to build a strong house, you need a stronger foundation. It goes back to the basic education, which is basically not equipping the students enough for them to succeed in the higher education institution. So I think while access to the university is important, it is also important to put emphasis on strengthening the basic education for those students who access a higher education institution to succeed in what they are doing. It goes again to the issue that was also mentioned by one of the panelists, that the standard decreases. It's the issue of the academics are put under extreme pressure because the government basically funds the institution based on the success rate. Now, these students who are not academically strong are expected to do well in the institution. Now, the question here is, to maintain the academic integrity, should you keep the bar there and ask the students to jump and reach the bar? Or should you lower the bar so that the success rate can be maintained? So those are the issues that I think needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. I will leave it to the panelists to decide which questions. I've made some notes. Lorraine, there's a gentleman there next to Lynette, Jerome Steenkamp.
I'd just like to ask whether higher education institutions can ever be inclusive without being exclusive. Because if you look at the selection criteria, the criteria already is exclusive. And I'd like to know from the panelists maybe how you can be inclusive without being exclusive.
Thank you, that's nice and short. There's a lady at the back. And can you just identify yourself, please?
My name is Orpa Zinyamba from University of Johannesburg. I just thought I should blow the trumpet a little bit for the University of Johannesburg. You mentioned that, do we expect the students to jump? We're very much aware of the fact that the students that are coming from high school are not good enough. We have bridging courses. So for 6 months, for instance, in the chemistry department, we give students, it's not university, it's not high school, the extended course. So we give them 6 months to catch up. Okay, and then after catching up, they can start doing university work, first year. So this is the extended course, but we do have the mainstream. But as a gentleman mentioned previously, most of the students are actually not completing their degree in 3 years anyway. They're taking 4 years. So we are not ignoring the fact that students are not up to standard. We are doing something about it. The question is it enough? We don't know, but we are doing something about it.
Thank you very much. Any other university that has good programs like that? Rhodes does. So there is an engagement on these points. Okay, Lynette?
It's really just a comment with regard to what Teresa said about the defense mechanisms that people and institutions have by saying standards will drop, we have to be aware of our reputation, and how will we appear, and how you select candidates to fit in and not to rock the boat so much. I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of tired of being the poster child of how things can work, particularly in the environment where I'm in. I've taken, I've replaced white men in the news environment where I work in. And at some stage, there were questions and there were a lot of anxiousness about, will she measure up? And the bar that I was measured against were white men, white Afrikaans white men, which was kind of difficult because our frame of reference is completely different. And I recall a time when there was so much reporting of what the expectations were, and this is the legacy of these men, and what will we get? And for a very long time, the numbers for the various shows, for radio and television, were closely scrutinized because everybody was so afraid that the numbers would drop. And my concern is that in this day and age, we still have white as the measuring, the yardstick that we have, well, I feel I have to live up to many times. And I want to know, how can I introduce the conversation or frame it then in a different way, that when we assume, when you see someone, that I don't always up to this day have to hear that I speak wonderful Afrikaans and where did I learn it. That is the kind of thing that you are faced with every day. And I have to always seem to be balanced, even though some of my viewers and listeners say the weirdest, the strangest, the most biased, racist things, I always have to appear biased, and I had to find a way of addressing things without making it about me, because when I raise it, it is, oh, you've got a chip on your shoulder still about race. So it's how do you introduce those conversations besides the gender issues and all this other stuff, without it becoming a whole political conversation over and over and over again when you have the dialogue of the deaf.
Thank you very much. I think that's about covering it. Joe, it seems you have the bulk of the questions. I trust you've taken note of them. Lizette requested us to look at the strengthening of the institutional forums. It lost its purpose. Also, student affairs seem to have lost their purpose. Low participation in student elections. It seems there's only a political agenda. And then the issue of gender being it's not on the agenda yet, and that we need a TRC on gender. And then the others, I trust you have covered, because it's focusing on access.
Thank you very much,
You have
Chairperson.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think that quite a number of the questions, I think I kind of addressed that. And so I think people just wanted to make a comment to kind of emphasize particular points and so on. So I certainly don't want to deal with each and every comment that people have made. I think the point about institutional forums and so on, I think in broad terms for me, that there are very good people at higher education institutions, as we know. And I didn't have the chance to deal with all the very positive things that people are doing with regard to that. But the only point for me I want to say is that, part of the consciousness is about, if one wants to enhance diversity and so on, and things loses its meaning and so on, then I think it's important to review that, and also through careful planning, and looking at, where you're wanting to go to, one kind of addresses those things. And I think, given your experience, I think there are different ways in which one can mobilize in a university, to raise the issue and put it on the agendas. So let me be as broad as, as that. I do think that we've got a problem in terms of student politics and so on. The question for me always is, why do the 95% allow this to happen? So there's a real thing there. I do think the issue about, and I think the conversation is happening with a number of young people, where young people are beginning to say, we can't just, consistently take what other people are saying. We actually need to begin to raise our voices and so on. I think that is happening, and the message must be more and more that, people must take responsibility for what is happening. I think if one talks about leadership, sometimes people say, you get the leaders that you deserve, because I do think in terms of democracy that, we need to encourage students, particular to take up, their kind of leadership roles and so on. I agree with you. I think the issues about gender, particularly the issues about violence against women, it's huge in South Africa, and I don't think that we're really addressing that. I had a discussion earlier also about the whole questions about reporting of violence and so on. But as institutions, I think, and as the education system as a whole, we need to really take seriously, violence and how that influences learning in a negative way. A few years ago, we had a person that came and did a number of workshops with us and so on, and we produced a number of things that looks at policies and the real effect. I think, certainly that is something that one needs to mobilize in terms of that. The question about the private sector, I did think I said at the beginning, one of the key issues that we are faced with is leaders must be able to talk across the class divide. I think it's a very serious thing, and in some cases a number of people are taking up the kind of issues around the questions around the class divide, you know, the 65,000 versus others. And, you know, I know that University of Johannesburg, for example, has got a program where what they are doing is they are giving bursaries to people across the sector, but also they look at the quintile 1 and quintile 2 schools as well, you know, so that one can actually cover that. Because it's possible to try to address that at the same time, but it is a real challenge. I must say it's a real challenge in terms of that. The questions about access, I agree. I kind of said it. You can't just let people into the institution. You need to look at what the big word is, epistemological access, you know, so that people are also able to deal with the curriculum, as it were. So let me not say more about that. Of course, the problem is that, you know, that in our schooling system, there's a serious problem, and you know, I hope that we'll be able to sort, you know, out that problem. But we know that the key issue is that if learners are not in the classes and they're not being taught, you know, I mean, that's the kind of thing that the whole education, not only that society must be able to deal with, you know, and Julian spoke about leadership. In some cases, leadership is not popularity contests, you know. You need to make hard decisions. I was at an event a few weeks ago where the Education Labor Relations Council was saying that one of the things that they're putting on the agenda for the next 5 years is that there should be labor peace within education, so that you don't have teachers going on strike and, you know, disadvantaging already, you know, black learners in the country. Okay, maybe I should stop there, but quite a number of the things that people have raised, I mean, there are issues there, and I think, you know, we need to, as citizens, as it were, and our positions where we are, we need to take those kind of issues up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Teresa, can you address the issue of TRC on gender? And Julian, can universities be inclusive? And if you have other comments to make, please. Can you use mine?
Yes, I would agree with you totally that not nearly enough has been done about gender, and I think the terrible violence against women and girl children in this country reflects that very much. But I wanted to comment specifically on your issue around white being the yardstick, which I absolutely would agree with, and I think it's a huge problem for people who have become successful in organizations and institutions, and even those who are trying to. And I would say that it's not just white is the yardstick, but male is the yardstick, basically. And I don't have a solution. I think that you in your position are very important, because I believe role models are incredibly important. But I don't think there's any real way that one can make your life easier. You're just out there ahead and somebody that others will look up to. I found that question so difficult. I've been deliberating about how do we be inclusive without being exclusive. And I'm not quite sure I really understand it, because if we're being exclusive, surely we're not being inclusive. I don't know. You avoided that one, Joseph, I noticed. But inclusivity means being open to all and letting people be themselves integrated into institutions. Whereas exclusivity for me suggests that you have institutions which are specifically for certain kinds of people. So to me, the two can't be married. And just although it's not my area, I just really want to say something about the student politics. I think the universities where student leadership is being successful are those that have managed to break away from students representing political parties. And a lot of young people have emerged, and there's a lot of very positive youth organizations that we see now, which I think are the result of student leaders breaking away from the political party. Okay.
I just want to say one thing with regards to the way you defined inclusivity. I think that the issue is more the issue Joe raised, that we need to provide students with different options. And it's unfortunate that we've closed a lot of the colleges We need more colleges for some of the students because universities need to set a certain standards. Just like a medical school need to set certain standards or a law school need to set certain standards and attract those students who can meet the demands of at that particular level. I think it's unfortunate in South Africa that we don't have the steps that you have in the US, where some students can attend a community college, you can attend a city college, you can attend a state college. If you do well at that college, you can apply to a university. So I think universities will always be exclusive to the extent that you defined it. I think the challenge of inclusivity is much more how representative we are, not only of the students, but of the faculty, and how representative we are of different backgrounds so that we can also bring different perspectives about knowledge and ideas in. I think that's the challenge of inclusivity. Just on the TRC, I really think we reneged on continuing the reconciliation conversation. It was sort of nonsense to think those couple of months can do it. And I think we have a responsibility to pick up those conversations again and have mini TRCs all over the place.